Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Whiskey Neat, spirited conversations with interesting people. I am your host, Kristopher Hart. This week's episode was fun, so fun. So if you remember a few years ago, we actually had Al Young over to my event, the Houston Whiskey Social, but that event is such a blur, such a mess that I don't, a fun mess, not an actual mess, that I don't get to talk to anybody. So I didn't get to enjoy Al's presence. Then a month later, I find out he did someone that I look up to, Mike G. I've talked about him before on the show. Mike G was the original Spirits podcast in Texas. Show de V with Mike G. Based out of Austin. Great guy. Couldn't be nicer. And saw that Al Young did his show. And I was like, hold up. You were just here. We couldn't do my show, but you got to do Mike's show. So after my feelings were hurt and I cried enough, Nick remembered to bring Al by this time when he was in town. So today we sit down with Al Young. Everybody knows Nicholas Talamantes. He is the Texas, well, he's the rep, in my opinion, for the state of Texas. He kills it, blows it out of the water, couldn't be a nicer guy. This week's show, as always, is sponsored by Terlato Distell Artisan Spirits, leader in premium artisan products like Bunnahabhain, Deanston, Ledaig, Tobermory, Bains, Black Bottle, and Scottish Leader. You can pick up the entire line at your local liquor store, or if you are a retailer, reach out to your United Wine and Spirits rep. That's the only sponsor we have for tonight's show, or today's show. We've actually got quite a few sponsors coming down the pipeline, some big projects in the works for the show. I want to remind everybody that Total Wine here in Houston carries our, if you remember a few episodes back, we picked the first ever Pinhook Rye single barrel ever in the United States. Ever. I say ever in the world, but I don't think they even offered it outside the U.S. So we had Sean Josephs here from Pinhook a few episodes back, and Daryl Bowman from Bad Wine Reviews. Check out his channel on YouTube. Couldn't be a funnier guy. And he just got some new equipment too. So a whole new look and feel to that show. We picked out a barrel of Pinhook Rye, cask strength, unfiltered, barrel char floating around inside. Only time it's ever been done. First time it's been done. And it can be found at 5 Houston area Total Wine locations. And it's been out for about a week. So it's not, I don't know how much is left. I have to double check with them, but there's not much. So Total Wine and Spirits, for those who are local, you can find it in the Woodlands. You can find it at Baybrook. You can find it at Post Oak here in the Galleria area, Willowbrook location, and the Katy location. Champions Ford? Champions, what's that area, that west side of town? I don't know. The part of town I'm too poor to go to. Okay, got through that. Got through single barrel program. Oh, tickets for the Houston Whiskey Social go on sale September 1st. This episode will come out in 2 weeks, so it'll be getting pretty close. September 1st, we will put the Pappy Van Winkle tickets on sale, the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection tickets on sale. Both VIP and GA tickets will also be on sale at HoustonWhiskeySocial.com through the Eventbrite website. Tickets will go on sale. I will tell you now that the Pappy and the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection tend to fill up pretty darn quick. So do not miss your opportunity. This year, we are releasing quite a few things that have never been seen before, ever. And I'm super, super excited about what's coming down the pipeline for both this show and, of course, the Houston Whiskey Social. I think that pretty much covers all of our bases. Without further ado, Nicholas Talamantes from Four Roses and deservedly Bourbon Hall of Famer, Al Young. Cheers. Right off the bat, Al, I've met you before. Got to sit down and enjoy your so thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
Very nice seeing you again, Nick.
Always.
You've been on once before?
Twice
before.
We did the off site. And then me and Matt a long time ago.
And Matt, yeah, I remember that one.
And then me and Brent.
You and Brent.
Remember by the pool?
Brent Elliott. That's right. I remember. So we've done a couple of Four Roses themed episodes. This one's extra special. Who gives a shit about Brent? Al's here.
Well, I like Brent.
I like Brent too. I'm kidding. I actually brought. I know that we see several picks on the table. Four Roses has a cult following. I don't even have to go into the intricacies and the nuances of the fact that you guys have 10 recipes. Your picks are very well loved. People know who Four Roses is, right?
Yeah.
So just to kind of get started, I don't know if I should bring this out now or bring it out later, but I'm going to bring it out now just because I'm super excited just to have it on the table. But I brought, it's not an Al Young, but this was the bottle that Al Young got it shaped from.
Right.
And it's an American blended whiskey at 86 proof. It is not a bourbon, and it actually has it broken down to 35% straight whiskey, 65% grain neutral spirits. And for those who don't know, that would essentially be vodka in this case. So this is, I'm not expecting much from it. But Four Roses has grown so much in the past century and gone through such a blossoming, if you will, that it deserves kind of. And you've been doing this for 50 years?
52, yeah.
52 years?
Yeah.
So I thought this is a perfect moment to have this. So I'm excited. Let's get started. Let's start with something new. If you want to take the lead there, Nick.
So the newest picks that we'll have up on the table is going to be probably this Liquor Hut.
Okay.
So that was the Pasha bottle.
Pasha bottle's great.
Yeah.
Very happy with Pasha bottle. I tried to share the
sound.
love. I got my hands on, I think 3 of them, 3 of them. And I offered one up to some, locally via total legal channels and put it out there. Pasha does a great job. Great palate.
I think I ended up with about 3 myself.
There's a few stores, and then for those who aren't based in Houston or in Texas and have never heard of Liquor Hut, there are a few stores that when you come to Houston that you want to visit besides your Specs and your normal chain stores. Blind Pig, Liquor Hut. There's just a few, Rice and Bel Air. I mean, there's just a bunch of great stores. Premier is another one. Shiraj couldn't be a nicer guy. All 8 foot of him. He's the tallest man I've ever seen in my life.
I shake his hand, I literally get fingers like up to my forearm.
And you can usually find a pretty great Four Roses pick almost always at Liquor Hut until they're pretty. Yeah, this last one flew off.
This one went really quick. This was probably the fastest one that I've seen them go through. But then we also do, aside from those great stores that we have that obviously have picks coming, is Specs and Goody both should be seeing some on their shelves pretty soon as well.
Sweet. Yeah, you actually would know what's about to hit in Houston, what's about to drop.
You would think. But no, I know what's down the pipeline as far as shipping and all that goes. That's getting handled by Kent. So Kent sees all the purchase orders and stuff.
Sure.
I just kind of get notified when they're here.
Kent hasn't been, I know he hasn't been on the show, but has he been in the room?
Here?
Yeah, I could have sworn he set off camera once. He at the
he was
Brent one.
He was at the one with Brent. I forgot he was there for a while.
Well, Al, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So what do you like to drink?
I like to drink bourbon.
Yeah.
I primarily like to drink Four Roses bourbon. And probably the one that is my all-purpose go-to would be regular small batch, the 90 proof.
Sure.
Because it has the right balance of fruit and spice. And if I'm in a mind for a mixed drink, then I'd probably want to do a Four Roses small batch Manhattan.
Oh, sure. I've had quite a few old fashions with the small batch.
Both of them, right?
Appropriately priced, solid bottle, and now you've got its big brother. It's proofed up version on the shelf as well now too. Have you guys, since we've last talked, has it rolled out to other states yet, or is it still?
No, and it actually beginning in August. Yeah, next month it'll actually finally go statewide though in Houston. I'm sorry, in the state of Texas. So Dallas, San Antonio, and all the other extremities will finally have their hands on it.
I forgot that it was a city rollout, not a state rollout.
Yes. And, with Texas it was.
Sure.
Everyone else was state. And like I said, just when you compare some of the volume sizes, Houston and Dallas could be states themselves. So we had to kind of step it out.
Don't ever forget that.
Yeah.
Those listening.
Yeah.
we could leave you at any moment.
So yeah, it was pretty important that we stepped it out correctly. I mean, we knew it would probably ruffle some feathers, but it's more important to make sure we release it and it stays on the shelf than it gets dropped, gets bought up, and then
People get mad.
something else gets filled into the shelf, and then you got to go fight for that space all over again.
That's something that most consumers don't think about, is that you're fighting for essentially ad space on a shelf. If it's not there, something else will be there.
Agreed. Yeah. That's why I hate out stocks.
So you, and for those who don't know, you are actually quite involved and have been on many occasions, not just traveling the world, preaching the good word, telling some great stories. You're actually quite the famous storyteller. You are involved in quite a few picks.
Yes, I am. I go down and I'm gone probably 4 days a week, going down to assist Mandy Vance at the Private Barrel Selection Group. And it's quite fun. It's quite an operation.
I mean, people, it's ever since your bottle came out, people went from posting pics of them doing the selection in the tasting room to not only are we here doing a tasting, but we're here with Al Young. Like your celebrity has skyrocketed. The demand for you is off the charts. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many people, not only when they started flipping bottles, but they would post it next to you. Like, look, we're here with him. Does that bother you at all when you see people so excited, waiting in line, sit with you and take a photo and then immediately throw it up online? Do you even notice? Or
it's a humbling experience, actually, because I don't think of myself that way.
Sure.
I mean, I really don't. I'd much rather be highly approachable and have people smile, laugh, and give me a wave, whatever it might be, than to be some sort of aloof person that, everybody comes in the room and they owe you a favor for being there.
Sure.
I feel like I'm the one that owes them the favor for coming.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's something, it's kind of like when, and I've talked to other people who have gained even just a little bit of celebrity, but, and I'm not plugging the episode, but the Dolph Lundgren episode, he specifically said that, when he did Rocky, he wasn't expecting that sort of attention all of a sudden, and it's very kind of jarring at how much people know who you are, how kind of weird they start acting around you when they meet you the first time. What's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you at one of the meet and greets? Has anything ever odd happened?
Well, it's not so much what's happened at the meet and greet, but where it happens. And when it happens. I remember I was at an archery competition with my granddaughter. And I was just going in there to watch her shoot and wish her the best and everything else. And my wife was along with me. And before long, somebody that we were sitting at the table with spoke up and said, "You're Al Young, aren't you? We know you. You're in the bourbon world. You're with Four Roses." And it was like just breaking that mystique of going there to wish my granddaughter well. And did
you hate it?
No, well, what do you do? What can you do?
Sure.
I mean, if they took time to recognize it, then you want to spend a few minutes with them. I mean, they're customers.
Sure.
And once you get involved in this sort of thing, you kind of lose that exterior of yourself.
That barrier, that personal space.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And it happens at odd times, like the archery competition.
Sure.
Or you go out for a quiet meal that suddenly jumps into a bourbon session.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And my wife will do the best she can to get through with it. She'll even mention sometime that he's the brand ambassador for Four Roses Bourbon. Well, that just blows the place up.
So does your wife enjoy it, or?
She does. Yeah, she enjoys it.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
She enjoys it, but neither one of us really are caught up in it, though.
Sure.
We don't go seeking it. It just suddenly happens.
Right.
So it's a lot of fun, but if I ever got to the point where I expected it to happen and wanted it to happen, and went out to do interviews and everything else to make it happen, that's the time to get out of it.
Sure.
It really is.
Your role, you are, I hate to say you're the face of the brand, but you're definitely a face of the brand, right? Brent and yourself are probably the most, and for those of you who have ever been involved in a pick, Mandy's widely loved. I mean, I couldn't speak more highly of Mandy. I'm a huge fan, and you're the face, and you're still in essence. I mean, Nick comes from the distributing world. It's his job to go out and be a salesman, and you're doing essentially that. Your job is to sell the brand. So I don't think it would hurt you too hard to, maybe hire a publicist or to work to build you. You know what I mean? There's some bars and restaurants that hire publicists. I mean, Chris Shepard.
Oh yeah,
he's marrying his publicist. I
didn't know that.
They've been boyfriend and girlfriend for a long time. They just got engaged. I think he hit it in a crawfish. He's an amazing chef here in Houston, and he's real big on what would you call it? I wouldn't say foreign food. That sounds offensive. What's the international cuisine? Right?
Yeah, international cuisine. It's a good appropriate title.
And I swear to God, I think he hid the ring in a crawfish, a nice ring,
big crawfish,
a big crawfish.
Baby lobster.
And yeah, they're getting married. So I mean,
good for him.
You're already married, so I'm not telling you should go marry a new publicist, but I don't think it would be too vain of you to this is what you're doing now is, he's been your publicist the past couple of weeks. Al's coming to town, guys. We're gonna be at this place, this place, this place. I mean, right after here, you're going to 8 Row, right? Or no, Poison Girl. But when you're in town, you hit the road. I mean,
we just it's nonstop. We go from place to place to place. To get out and meet as many people as we can, spread the word about Four Roses, find out if they have any concerns or anything we can help them with. There's still a pipeline that can go back to the distillery through me or through Nick. But if you go out and you meet people and they say, well, we really liked that private selection over there, but we think maybe you ought to be looking at an OBSE or something like that, or Q, or, OBSO, not the water mash, but the O, then you have to kindly explain to them that it's up to the people that are doing the selection to make the choice.
Sure. What's the number one feedback you get that's maybe constructive or negative in nature?
I think that probably the number one feedback that we get back out of the private barrel selection is the fact that they're all top quality barrels. That there's not a cull in the bunch.
Oh, sure.
And that, it makes it really hard for them to make the choice. I always laugh when I'm doing the selection. I never tell anybody what I like. I wait till they're finished picking.
Sure.
And chances are, after you've done it for a number of years, you don't race through it, but you pretty well have a mental disposition about what you like and what you don't. So I'll write it on the back of a napkin and stick it on the table. And tell them that when you're done selecting, then we'll see how we match up.
Sure. So I figured the number one complaint would have just been we need more. The number you guys are in such a. I think I said this word last time you were here. There's such a fervor for the brand that there's not enough to go around. You guys are in a similar state of Sazerac, right? The 600 barrel program is a bit of a. Death match for some stores trying, just champing at the bit to get, and it is champing, it's not chomping. That's a common misunderstanding. Champing at the bit to get a barrel of their own, I figured that would have been the number one feedback. Because as far as taste goes, you're absolutely right. I've never had a bad Four Roses. I've had a different Four Roses, right? That I can taste distinctly strong. The one we picked this year, the OESQ, had a really strong, I'm partial to my grandfather smoked pipes. I love a rich tobacco note in my bourbon, regardless of the bourbon. And there was such a strong tobacco note in it that I couldn't let it go. and then we kind of set it aside and narrowed down our pick, and then we just came back to it, and we ended up with the tobacco barrel. So we loved it so much. So I'm a little partial to that.
It's amazing what people see in our whiskeys that tickles something in their own palate descriptions or their own acknowledgement of the aroma and so forth. I don't think there's any one descriptor in our whole bunch that says tobacco.
Oh, really?
But it's there.
Oh, sure.
And there really isn't one that has anything to do with the specific spice anise or anything that just says, oh, yeah, man, it's going to be spearmint in that. And when you say it is, and you start looking through these barrels, and if the way we do it is unique from the standpoint that we turn the barrels all around, so you can't read them and find out what the recipe is.
Sure.
And so you can't prejudge what you're going to be smelling. Okay? So you might think that you've got let's pick one, OBSQ. And you're dead set that you know what OBSQ smells like, and you really don't like it. So you're going through the lineup, and you pick the barrel, and I'm almost willing to bet you it'll be an OBSQ.
You mean
I've
because
seen that so many times?
Are you saying because I mentioned you noticed tobacco in that one, or are you saying in general the person who says they don't like a specific recipe will often pick that recipe blind?
I'm going with you on the second part, and I'm certainly not against finding tobacco in a product. The reason I say that is 65% of the final attributes of the whiskey has to do with the barrel. So each barrel of wood is just a little bit different, even though they're universally charred to the same depth. It's number 4. But where it is in the warehouse, where it lays, what tier it's on, what rack, you can have barrels on the same tier sitting side by side with the same recipe, same manufacturing date, and they'll all be different.
Do you feel that Four Roses may have, or at least acknowledge that they may have shot themselves in the foot by having too many recipes to choose from? Whereas if someone goes to Maker's Mark or Beam, they go without any concept of mash bill, right? They just go and they're tasting their entire what's the word I'm looking for? Their mentality is that it's just different barrels, right? Different placement, where it sits in the warehouse. They're not thinking about mash bill or these things. Because of the excitement around Four Roses, do you guys ever think like maybe we should just narrow this down to like this specific recipe for single barrel program so that it's only the barrels that, you get what I'm saying?
What children do you let out? Which children do you have say stay at home?
Well, hey, I've got 4 children. I can think of 2 I don't want to talk to. So, I'll make the decision.
Well, you know, our pride has always been in the fact that we have 10 different recipes.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
But the problem is trying to get all 10 available to the public while we're waiting for some of them to come of age.
Sure.
So for a long time, we didn't have any K and O yeasts, because all of that was being dedicated to the small batch selection. So now we're seeing K come of age and be put back into the lineup of the barrels. And if anything, we're sorry that we can't have all 10 recipes available all the time.
Oh, 100%.
For everybody to choose. So, you know, I think if we shot ourselves in the foot in any way, shape, or form, it's just that we don't have enough to go beyond 600.
Sure, and I hope we did an interview with Alexander Gabriel, which we've got to film the intro for. Don't let me forget. And sometimes I hope that question doesn't come off as offensive. I'm a huge fan. I don't think Four Roses has shot themselves in the foot in any way. In fact, I applaud, and you and I have had this conversation, the new Small Batch Select was such a great idea in every possible way. The rollout, the just everything about it was like, oh, of course, why have we not been doing this sooner, right? It's such a perfect product, I think, for you guys. But so, in the fly, I'm thinking, I wonder if that's got to be the frustration, because I know that for years the barrels were not turned around, and Mandy picked up on it, right? And I'm sure you've picked up on it. And they thought, okay, there's a lot of bias when people walk in. They think, I want an OESO, I want an OESQ. And they kind of come in with that mentality. And your solution to that is to just try to trick them, or blind them, basically, and just make sure that they experience it without any preconceived notion. I think that's the word I was looking for.
Actually, it gets worse than that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of people got caught up in the mystique that was created about M Warehouse on the west side a few years ago. And people were requesting from Mandy that we use only barrels from M Warehouse on the west side. And I think there was even a rack number involved that they wanted all their barrels from. My goodness, we couldn't do that for everybody.
Sure.
I mean, we'd run out of a tier, we'd run out of a rack.
You run out of a warehouse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we had to come up with a way to do that. And Brent is the arbiter that figures out which barrels are going to go into the program. But it got to be so crazy that we were thinking in jest and humor about running out there one morning and writing an M on every warehouse.
I mean, it's kind of like Camp Nelson right now in
Sure.
Turkey and Russell's. Any of those picks come out and they're like, oh, is it from Camp Nelson? And it's
Or
like,
the LLGC thing. Like there's
oh, yeah.
there's this
Laser
there's
codes.
this constant secret code that the fanatics are looking for, like to set apart what they have and what they picked. This is from a specific warehouse. This is now I understand liking something from lower tiers. Paul Hansen over which I'd like to get him on one day. Have you ever met Paul?
Mm-hmm.
Paul
just text me.
he runs one of the groups in Beaumont, and he had mentioned, I think he said he preferred lower tiers. There tend to be a little lower in proof and a little bit more mild. And it could be the opposite. He could have said the other thing, but
It's the opposite.
yeah. So I remember distinctly that there being a preference, and I totally understand that. But the other things, there's a secret code, barrels. Wade Woodard has an ugly barrel theory. That when you go, and I actually like his theory.
His is pretty spot on.
His is almost always spot on.
Almost, yeah.
When we did this selection, I immediately registered the ugly barrel, and it wasn't even in people's top.
Really?
When we started narrowing down the pick, the ugly barrel wasn't in the top. But when we did Good Golly Miss Molly 2 years ago, the ugly barrel won. His theory is that the ugly barrel has the most interaction, the deepest penetration of the liquid. And so obviously the barrel just kind of looks beat up by the end of its term, and that's usually the winner, like an indicator that that's a better barrel. And I've seen that ugly barrel theory prove true on no less than 4 occasions. So I kind of can't help when I walk in, I see that's the ugly barrel. I'm hoping Mandy has done enough confusion that when I'm looking at the samples, I don't know what it is.
Up until tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to scrub them all down before we ever put them in the lineup.
Paint them.
Just paint them.
Yeah.
Paint them all with
that people think that the barrel itself is resulting in an ugly barrel, but it's not. It's the barrels above it are expanding, and some of that liquid is coming out and going down. And when it does, it's concentrated liquid now. So it's going to be staining the barrels below.
Sure.
You're going to have a little bit of age on the rungs that are around them. And when that liquid hits the metal, it's going to cause a chemical reaction there.
Rust.
So I don't think you're really far off the mark in talking about the ugly barrel thing. What I'm thinking too is when you get into those lower tiers and the lower proof, you're having just the opposite happen to what's in the top tiers with the higher proof and less volume. I mean, you're getting a more concentrated liquid up there, higher proof, different kind of flavor than maybe that flavor at the bottom. It might be a little bit more mellow and a little bit more volume. And right there in the center, you've got a dichotomy of nothing. It's all over the map.
Sure.
So you put all of those factors together in trying to judge a tier. For example, if you're looking at OBS Q's, when he makes his decision, Brent makes his decision, he'll choose one rack, one tier, and so many barrels in that tier. And we will run through all of those to represent that one recipe. They'll all be different. And they're sitting right next to each other.
Sure, yeah.
They were produced on the same day. There will be variations in the wood. That counts for a lot of it, even though it's all a number 4 char. It's just the way we age in those single floor warehouses that makes up the difference. It's cool, I think.
It's very cool. I mean, the nerdiness factor for Four Roses is definitely up there. I've seen people, there's been some picks that were famous, well-known picks that traded for lots of money. And people will find out later that they picked a barrel that happened to be sitting next to that barrel. and they'll use that as a sales pitch.
It's hype.
This is the sister barrel
Yeah.
that was right next to that famous barrel. So it's got a little bit of famous in there. And
And you're probably asking, what do I think of that?
oh, sure.
And what I think of it is, we don't have to advertise.
Oh, no, you don't. Yeah. It's like the whole Jack Daniels' bourbon thing, which I know you hate. I've had discussions with some of their employees, including their assistant master distiller, who just said, forget what I think. Just by having that argument out there, people are constantly talking about whether or not Jack is bourbon or is not bourbon. But it means that the brand's being talked about in the zeitgeist. It's in the culture. So
Exactly.
it's smart, and it's perfect. No complaints. And this is I think Four Roses. Maybe that's the level of complication that y'all have put into 10 different recipes, creating a code that people are latching onto is probably part of the reason why you guys are so successful now.
We've got people that map all of these selections and pester Mandy for information about where did that sister barrel go that you're talking about? I want to get a hold of that. Or what was the code and everything that a particular retailer picked? And, that's golden. It takes a few extra minutes to do the work. But, for the true aficionados and the geeks, that makes us very much desired in their eyes, I believe.
I couldn't agree more. Have you tasted this yet?
Mm-hmm.
I still get the tobacco notes. I know you're kind of working on that glass. Do you get what I'm talking about? There's like a heavy spice.
Oh yeah, I'm about halfway done with my bottle.
Oh, I didn't know if you.
Yeah, no, I have got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny. I think sometimes we can get caught up with. I'm a fan of the ugly barrel theory in general when it comes to the outliers. I like outliers. We know what good bourbon tastes like. We know what I love Maker's Mark Cask Strength, which is their brand has striven to be uniform, meaning all the barrels are the same. It's supposed to all taste the same, like their consistency, right? And I like that. I like the consistency. But when I go to the barrel, when I come into Four Roses and I want to do a pick, I want to pick something that is unique. That's the whole concept of the single barrel program. So I like, you know what gross is. I've never had anything gross, but I've had stuff that's crazy unique, and I'd much rather pick something that is an outlier in some way, shape, or form. I've gotten bubblegum from bourbon.
Yeah.
Especially ours.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorites is cotton candy.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to think that some of these whiskeys, it's like going to the state fair or going down the Midway and getting that overly sugary kind of atmosphere that's contributed to by the barrel in some of these liquids. And it's a trip. It really is. It's really neat to do it.
I prefer the weird, the unique, and and you guys are definitely rolling out some of the most unique liquid variants consistently. That it, I think it's a part of y'all's success. It's been fantastic. I know some brands, I won't say who, if it's too unique, they won't let you. They won't either. If it slipped through and made it into the barrel selection, they won't let you keep it. If it's too unique. And it's just, I want the weird, I want the interesting. Variety is the spice of life, as they say.
Well, sure it is. And you're talking about the variety that we offer with the two different mash bills, the high rye in one, the high corn in the other, and those 5 different yeast. We're already 10 different categories above the average person, or the average producer, rather, that only has one mash bill and one yeast and relies on age and position in the warehouse to do the work. So we think we've got a pretty decent scheme going here. Yeah. And then every once in a while, like we did this year, we come out with things like the small batch select, which will just kind of say, hey, look what we can do. But more importantly, look what we can do and do it continually.
Consistently.
So that's going to be the Fourth Rose.
Is the Fourth Rose for those of you who are here in Houston. All of you other poor people, you'll have to deal with it when it finally rolls out in your city.
Dallas.
I wanted to ask you 2 things, but first, the easy question. Second, I don't know that you'll answer the second question, but I'm going to try. First, back to what we're talking about in terms of tasting notes. Has there ever been anything that was so bizarre of a tasting note that a descriptor that you heard that just stuck with you all these years?
Well, I think probably the one that really impacted me from long ago was somebody wrote that something had the odor of old gym shoes.
As a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I don't think it was particularly complimentary. No, it isn't something we put in our tasting notes for the brands that we put out. But they had picked up some kind of an odor of staleness.
Something from their
something
childhood.
that was in there, probably in their childhood. Or maybe they'd just been out running track or something. I have no idea before they came in for the tasting. So they said old gym shoes. And,
How'd you feel about that?
well, I was surprised.
Sure.
I mean, but I learned never to discount anything, because what you may think is a unique odor to you might trigger someone over here to say, yeah, I know the same thing. Or if it's a really positive thing, like floral and roses. When I first went on the road with the idea of talking to people about the brands and everything, I was out doing single barrel. And I had given the whole litany about the one recipe, and the age was 9 years, and you get caramel out of it, and you get the smell of flowers and all of this thing. And there was a lady standing in the back of the room, and I asked for questions. Well, when you ask for questions, you got to be ready, right?
Sure.
So I asked for questions.
There were no dumb questions, just dumb
no,
people.
and you got to honor them all. And this lady raised her hand up, and she said, now, I saw everything that you said was in there. I saw the maple. I saw the roses. But she said, I get an element of wild cherry in there.
Okay. Like a medicinal cherry or like a
Luxor.
Like a real cherry. Okay.
Really highfalutin cherry. And I was at a loss because I was thinking,
Old Kentucky.
man, that's not in the playbook. I don't know where that is.
Sure.
So I said, why not? Why couldn't you? And so then when we went back in the lab and we sat down, everybody looked at it and talked about it. That's when we started adding in the red cherries, or the wild cherry idea to be in the single barrel.
Sure.
But, you never know. And you can always use stuff that people offer up to you.
Are you going to add the gym shoe stocks thing to the single barrel program as well? Or
If I ever do, that barrel probably won't stay in the program very long.
Okay. So one last question, and I always try to squeeze the juice, so to speak. I try to get a little bit of insider information anytime someone comes on. Fred No had nothing for me. So my question to you is, going back to trying to solve the code, is there a specific warehouse or tier that you or the employees have? Because sometimes that'll happen. Is there's like a special place in a special warehouse that you guys have definitely noticed maybe a trend of good barrels coming from?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
But I can write that down for you.
Are you being serious?
I can write it down for you, and I can share it with you, but you can't tell anybody.
Okay. Yeah, write it down.
You won't even tell me.
Do you know this? Have you heard this one before?
I've actually asked this question a lot of times.
And they always tell you no, or
Yeah. Or what's the oldest barrel? And he goes,
all right. So before
yes.
I look on this, are you being serious? I can't say it on mic.
No, you couldn't. If you did that, you'd start a firestorm we'd never get rid of.
Sure.
Because everybody would be pestering us to get the barrels out of that warehouse and that tier and that rack and that location.
Is it before I look? I'm trying. I'm so excited. My heart's racing a little bit. Is this something that just you feel, or is this something that like Brent has thought of? Mandy, are you guys in agreement? Is this like a consensus?
I would think that Mandy and I probably have a good insight into that.
Okay.
Now, I'm not so sure that Brent is involved in it, because he's kind of ecumenical. He looks at everything very objectively.
Sure. The whole back to the which kid do you let go thing. Yeah.
Would you like to see what it is?
I do.
But you can't tell anybody.
Okay, I won't say it on mic, but can I hold the paper?
Sure.
Can I look at it? Wait, is that the tier?
I told you, they've never told me.
Is that the tier there?
Yeah.
And that's the warehouse?
Yeah.
We can just end the show here. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Thanks so much for coming on.
No worry. Nice to see you.
And I can keep this or
you can keep it.
Okay,
But
I won't show
to,
anybody.
I'll have to throw it away first.
Okay,
So I just
all
put
right,
it in the
all
waistband,
right.
and nobody
I'll
will
tell you
ever
what,
see it.
I'll just keep it in my heart. And the next time I think we have a barrel pick coming up in November that we're planning on heading out there, I'm gonna see if I can put in a request to Mandy. I can't believe you shared that with me.
And if I did, and you tell somebody, it will come back to me.
What
because-
if I just ask for the tier but not mention your name?
Well, because the
Or the rack or the
social
warehouse.
media is such that you just have to watch what you say because it goes everywhere.
This is my show. I'll say what I want.
Well, you can say whatever you want to, but when you do, then you have to be ready to suffer the consequences.
Okay. I'll keep it with me.
Don't tell Kenny.
Kenny?
Call me.
Oh, hey, Kenny. Guess what, buddy? I got one on you, bud.
Suck it.
I got my own Pursuit series coming out soon, directly from Four Roses. I love Kenny Coleman. That was awesome. I don't even know where to go from here. Oh yeah, this. So I got this old, and I want to say it was 60s. The bottom is so worn. Is it 55? 65?
Let me see if I can help you
I
with
got
that.
new glasses. I still can't read the bottom of the bottle. Silence is always great for radio.
Yes, it is. This bottle came out in 19. From what I could see on the back here,
I bought two.
this was 1970.
Okay.
Yeah.
I bought two because I wanted to do a tasting at the social with it. I think it's a fun bottle that people would enjoy tasting regardless of what. Again, I've never actually tasted it, so I don't know what to expect. But
I don't know how much y'all would put on enjoy.
Well, the brand, like I said, the brand's grown so much. The priorities for Four Roses throughout the years, obviously, early on was more of a lighter blended whiskey that wasn't really focused on the premium market. And it wasn't until you guys expanded and focused in places like Japan and Europe that you guys have refocused the brand into what it is today. Care to talk? Do you know much about? Do you remember the first? What year did you start?
1967.
1960. So you were there when this bottle came out.
You probably made it.
Probably was. I knew about it, but if you read on the label, read on the front label where it was manufactured.
Blended and bottled by Four Roses Distilling in Lawrenceburg, Baltimore, Maryland.
Lawrenceburg, where?
Indiana. Oh,
Ooh,
yeah.
I forget that pops up a lot on our old bottles is Indiana.
So this whiskey may have had some Four Roses bourbon in it,
Sure.
but chances are it was fabricated there with Indiana bourbon, which would have been like LESV or LBSV, L being for Lawrenceburg.
Sure.
It is what it is. It has blending sherry in it for flavor. It has caramel for color. And it has more neutral grain alcohol than anything.
Sure. Again, for those who aren't familiar, neutral grain alcohol is essentially vodka, right? So when you distill to 190 proof, you basically cook out all the flavor from the mash itself. Do you want a little sip?
Just a little bit.
A little reminder of the good old days?
Yep.
What?
Thank you.
What were your thoughts when the company shifted from domestic Kentucky straight bourbon being produced to the Four Roses brand being blended? And I think you said at one point they had the idea to even produce light whiskey.
Well, they did produce light whiskey,
okay.
Yeah. They produced light whiskey primarily in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. And that was in the 60s because they got a tax break on it, and they could use it in their blended whiskeys.
It smells great.
To take the place of aged whiskeys. So light whiskey was whiskey that was distilled above 160 proof. Mm-hmm. It was put in a used barrel, so you didn't get any new wood, and it only had to be in there for a short period of time, maybe 2 years.
Okay.
So they would use that for their blended whiskeys. Now you have to remember that Four Roses blended whiskey came about in the 1950s. They bought the brand in 1943. And since we were in World War II, they wanted to stretch the 20 million gallons of alcohol they got, bourbon actually, aging in warehouses as part of the Frankfurt distillery. And they wanted to stretch it by putting it into a blended version of Four Roses. because they thought the war was going to go on forever.
Sure, yeah.
And it ended abruptly in 1945, and they had all this bourbon left over. And so in the early 1950s, the decision was made to run Four Roses as a bourbon overseas while they were selling it as a blended whiskey in the United States. So they started out with a blend of bourbons and neutral grain alcohol and monkeyed with the recipe over time till they got to this one that had 65% neutral grain alcohol and some aged whiskeys from Lawrenceburg, maybe Four Roses, maybe Lawrenceburg, Indiana, and Relay, Maryland, put it together into what is called the Four Roses blended whiskey.
It smells fantastic. I'll tell you that much. And for something that has been rumored as being awful, I'm not
mad at
this.
it.
No, yeah.
And especially like once you mentioned that there's sherry added for flavoring, is I can really smell that.
The sherry's in there, even on the palate, you can really pull.
But now take a feel on the texture and the finish of the whiskey.
It's much thinner, a little bit more watery than I expected, but
short
that does not taste awful. It's not great. I mean, you can very clearly it's a blend of a lot of things, but it's not what I expected at all. I've had worse older whiskeys. You know, I had this awesome bottle, or I thought was awesome, from Sackville from 1941, a couple years back, 80 proof blended Scotch. The experience was great, like the piece of history, the time in a bottle, but it was just the worst thing I ever put in my mouth. So this is not bad.
Well, now you're thinking about the departure from bourbon to a lighter flavor and a lighter aroma. Now, fast forward to the 1970s.
Oof, that finish.
Or a little bit later when they came out with Four Roses Premium American Whiskey. And what they did was they added even more neutral grain alcohol, much less whiskey, more caramel and more sherry to make up for the difference. And the flavor even became more minute.
Yeah.
It sounds like a
So the people
hangover.
that had been loyal to the brand for a long time,
They didn't like New Coke.
they didn't really like New Coke. No.
But no, because I even didn't see like this is not
awful.
bad.
This isn't even bad for some of the stuff I've tasted today.
Today, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. I bought 2 bottles because I wanted to do a bit of a history. We haven't even talked about it yet, but Four Roses has been a big supporter of my whiskey festival here since the beginning. I've been working with Kent that long, 5 years in February. I would love to go back in time. I'm so in love with the concept that these are essentially time capsules.
They are.
All whiskey is just this little moment from that period.
And you can take a look at it in terms of the strategy of the producing company. Because after Prohibition, they were ready to stimulate the business again. Mm-hmm. They tried every way they could. They were bringing out a label a week, trying to get people interested in anything to have to do with bourbon.
Sure.
Okay, war comes along. We were the number 1 selling bourbon in the country during World War II, the beginning of the war. And then all of a sudden, during the war, we couldn't make any more. We had to make neutral grain alcohol for the war effort. So we had to use up those stocks of whiskey like I talked to you about earlier. And then after the war, cost-conscious people took over and tried to change menus. And as they did, the cocktail culture kicked in again. They were now having more parties at home, so they were going to pick up something like this and take it with them. Because it was mixable, highly mixable. And it was something that you could drink all night with and probably not get too tanked.
Sure. What's the proof on this?
86, is that what we said?
86 on that one.
Not bad.
And they even came out with an 80 proof version later. So, they were keeping up with the trends as it came about. And then we get into this light whiskey thing, and everybody had gone along with the idea that the whiskey manufacturing companies told you what they had to offer, told you what you should drink, and told you how you should drink it. So they had been doing that for a long time and preparing you to accept their products. Not only Four Roses, but all of the Seagram line, the Shenley line, everybody else.
Right.
But they had complete control of you as a consumer.
The marketing era, its golden era was those 50s, 60s. They knew exactly what to say to make people buy what they needed to buy.
Especially
Back in the 30s, they had to come out with a strategy to make it a more level playing field. For example, they said, we cannot use women in advertising. It's demeaning. We cannot put
They said that back then?
Yep. We cannot put Santa Claus in ads because that's not right. It's just not good to do that. Nothing with the holidays. Can't do holidays.
Don't want to soil Santa.
They turn around and bit themselves about the holidays because Christmas time they had to do something.
Sure.
But and you couldn't put children in ads, and you couldn't put the armed forces in ads, and they all agreed to this sort of thing that you couldn't do.
When did that stop happening?
Yeah.
Well, that came about as a strong thing in the 1930s after Prohibition was repealed to try to calm the community down so that you didn't draw fire from all of the people that still didn't like the fact that national prohibition was repealed. So they had that going on. It wasn't until the 70s that women got a boost back into ads.
Oh, no. It's horrible.
And ended up going on to television when I think Seagram's was a pioneer in that and brought women back on cable television.
Seagram's brought women back on?
They were what do you call it, an icebreaker of trying to get that thing started again. Of course, now
women dominate.
Women is a dominant force in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think
and you can all attribute it back to Prohibition when their great grandmothers went to speakeasies and drank cocktails, because that's what started the cocktail culture that has lasted even until today.
I don't want to say sex sells, but sex sells.
That too.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you guys were successful before you went overseas, or when you went overseas. You guys were, this was here, right? So
that was here in the United States only, right?
Obviously, you guys were successful at it. I mean, I'm sure it sold quite a bit.
Well, Seagram's had a large sales force that stretched around the world as well as in the United States. So consequently, they were going every day to a bar. Someone was in the major metropolitan areas and through some of the small cities in the country, urging retailers to at least consider Four Roses, handling reorders, helping them stock shelves. Very labor intensive to make all of this work.
Right.
Okay? So people were getting barraged by that. They were seeing advertisements in newspapers and magazines. All of this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, about shaping what you wanted, what you got, and what you did with it. Okay? So what's changed between then and today? Well, generally speaking, your sales forces are a little bit smaller than that. Okay? The other side of it is the fact that we have the Bourbon Trail. And now we're averaging in our small location 250 to 300 people a day.
That's awesome.
Coming in there to be a part of the Bourbon Trail with Four Roses. So our walkout is up in the tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even close to $2 million.
A year.
What's going on? Yeah, a year.
Just in visiting the distillery.
Just visiting the distillery, taking the tours and stuff. I probably shouldn't say that amount of money because I'm way off.
Yeah.
But my job is to make us look good, right?
Yeah.
But we're helping to that bottom line in terms of the Bourbon Trail. And that's an experience that's being helped all the way through the state by all the different distillers. At one time, there were about 7 or 8 of us doing it. And now there are 15 or 20, counting the small distillers that are starting up.
Right.
So we're getting the word out that way now with people coming to visit the distillery. Then we've got the bourbon societies that are jumping in and becoming learned people about bourbon whiskey, and they're helping to spread the word. And when you get all of that going on, then we've got another thing called Camp Run Amok, where bartenders come from all over the country and visit the distilleries, not just Four Roses, to let us tell them the latest news we've got and what makes our different brands unique. And they can go back and spread the word. Bartenders are an important part of what we do.
They're huge.
Very important part.
We were talking a little off air, and I hope I love bartenders, and I hope it didn't come across as me slighting bartenders. But I just think that there's the way things are changing. Oftentimes, when so much has happened within this environment, the sales environment. I've worked in sales my entire life, and when something is changing, oftentimes people don't see it changing until it's already out of control. And I think bourbon's a great example of this. People maybe saw things coming. People, obviously, a big part of the distillery world is projections. You guys project growth, but it's to the point now that it's fanatic. I mean, it's crazy. People are camping out all night, sometimes longer. I mean, when they released Al Young, the pictures. Did that give you any? Did it make? Have you ever gotten emotional? Did you get emotional?
It was
I would have
overpowering.
cried. Yeah.
I went out there that morning to sign bottles, and I thought there'll be a few people that showed up. And finally, before the signing began, I went down our driveway, around another driveway, and all the way out to the street, which was about 200 people. And I thought maybe I should do this. So I went to each person and thanked them for coming.
Really?
Yeah. And by the time I got back, they said, come on, you got to sign, you got to sign. So in the space of a couple of hours or whatever, we sold 250 bottles of that stuff.
It's just such a overwhelming time for this industry. And we were, talking about focus in sales, and bartenders are 100% still the core of all brands. I mean, there's no downplaying what they do. Especially for, you guys don't call it tan label anymore. You're pushing the 80 proof.
We don't call it yellow label anymore.
Well, I know.
So some people are calling it tan label. Wade. But I mean, just Four Roses bourbon is kind of what they're looking at.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's general consensus. I think is what most people are like. Yeah, let's just call it Four Roses bourbon.
When did you start speaking? When did you go through? Bernie Lubbers famously was a stand-up comedian before he started. I don't know if he was any good, but he did stand-up comedy. I actually, true story, last night I did my first open mic. It went with a bunch of friends down to Houston, and we signed up and did 3 minutes. And did you go through any of that, or did they just say, you're a steward for the brand, we want you to be traveling?
Well,
and
actually, before I became the brand ambassador, I had done a lot of tours at the distillery.
Okay.
And the way that worked is you'd come and say you wanted a tour, and the plant manager or the master distiller would yell down the hall, anybody got 5 minutes to take these people around? And one of us would walk out and do the tour, and it consisted of opening the front door and saying, there it is.
Sure.
And everybody looked and said thank you, and they got in their car and they left. Well, now we've got it to the point where you have paid tour guides and people doing this. So I kind of honed my skills over time. And then when it came time to retire, about 12 years ago, I went to the president of the company and said, I'm going to leave. I think maybe you should train somebody in my place. And he says, oh, no, you're not leaving. No, you can speak the story. You can tell people about Four Roses. I want you to write the book, which we did. And then
I have
go around the country.
Of those books.
Go around the country and talk to people about Four Roses. So that's pretty much the background of that part of it. Plus the fact that I was trained to be a teacher before I became involved in distillery work.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit of that background too. And I kind of tread the boards every once in a while and some theater here and there. But it all came together. It finally came together just as I was getting ready to get out of the business. So it's been a ball. It's been a lot of fun.
You've done it all.
Yeah. And do you travel internationally for the brand as
No,
well?
only in the United States. Yes.
How many weeks a year are you traveling?
I don't think it's that many. It's more like days a month. It's like maybe 7 to 8 days a month now because I've got to be there for the private barrel selections too.
Sure. And how does that work with the wife when you say, "Hey, I want to travel"? Is she good to have you? Happy to have you out of the house?
Well, she just wants to know how long were you going, and can I take the grandkids out to dinner while you're gone? And when I agree to all that, she's fine with it. So I still have to call her every day.
Oh, I'm familiar. Hey, I'm going to Louisiana to pick up a bottle. Okay. Well, so grandkids, that means you've got kids, right? Boys, girls?
Yes, we have 3 children. We have a son and 2 daughters.
Bourbon drinkers?
To some degree,
Sure.
yes.
But very caught up on what it is. And
Well, yeah, and they're big supporters. They all come out anytime there's a Four Roses event that they can get to. They wear the T-shirts and the sport shirts or whatever and support the brand any way they can.
what do they think about their famous dad?
Just dad.
Yeah.
Just dad.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be. Just
Sure.
dad.
Are they perplexed at all about how bourbon's taken off and like your rise and notoriety,
Your celebrity,
and your
yeah.
celeb status now?
Well, they're no more surprised than I am.
I've seen him mow his yard in his boxers. He's not that special.
Yeah.
They're surprised, but now they sort of accept it as what it is, But it's been a growing experience for the whole family to accept it for what it is. But every once in a while, my son will call me and say, "A buddy of mine's going to be at the distillery. You got time to take him around?" Or my daughter will call and she said, "Well, we've got 18 people coming on the 25th. Are you available? What can I do?"
Yeah, answers
So
yeah.
I'll go over there on a Sunday and hang out with them for a while. Or, we eat out a little bit. Older people do that because it's a lot cheaper to eat out than cook. And we have been kind of known around town in Lexington going to the different restaurants.
Cracker Barrel.
But it's
thinking
not.
Luby's.
Yeah, Cracker Barrel.
Luby's.
Anywhere they serve pablum, get out of here. But the drums don't roll and the curtains don't part and everything else is there.
Sure.
It's sort of like, have you ever been to Nashville, Tennessee?
Quite a bit, yeah.
Then you know what that's all about. If you see Nicole Kidman or somebody walking down the street with Keith Urban, nobody clusters around them. They just let them have their space.
I'm not familiar with who's Nicole. Is you say
Kidman? She's sort of like an actress
I know she is.
that kind of hangs
legend.
out every once in a while in great movies.
Sure.
And then he sings country music, I think.
I'm a little familiar with Keith Urban.
Yeah.
I like his brother Keith Worrell.
But,
Oh, no.
people,
He does one open mic.
One open mic set, and I've got this.
people just don't really, in the bourbon world, don't really worry about that notoriety.
Sure. Don't even think about it.
We all treat each other with a great deal of respect. And so does the public pretty much. We don't have anybody following us around like paparazzi and all that sort of thing.
Sure.
But it's kind of fun.
Sure.
It's kind of fun.
Well, I didn't mean to play into your ego here. I just or to blow smoke up your butt, but it is an honor, and I think most bourbon drinkers would agree. Anytime people travel, Houston's a big city, and a 40-minute drive to hang out with Al Young it means something, And obviously, we're huge fans of the brand. I know we've got about 4 minutes left. I wanted to get into this bottle that Evans picked. Last time Brent was on the show, we discussed the fact that there are no 100 proof picks in Texas, specifically because they're skewed the same, and anytime you do a private barrel pick, that's 100 proof, it's going to eat into the allocation of the regular standard 100 proof single barrel. And so there was a little bit
regular barrel strengths.
Yeah.
Correct.
Program. Yes.
And you lose a barrel at the same time.
Yes.
What do you mean you lose a barrel?
So like say we have X barrels to give. So not only will we lose those single barrel cases, we now have X minus 1 barrel to go out and
for
sell.
a barrel program. Yeah, correct.
So it's like a double-edged sword for the sales team.
Sure.
You were talking while he's pouring up for us. You were talking about the fact that it's such an honor. So you say to drive 40 minutes to visit with me. It's an equal honor for me to have somebody make that sacrifice to come sit and talk with me.
Sure.
Because I don't consider it that big a deal.
Right.
I really don't. I would hope that it was worth your time.
Oh, of course. Absolutely worth my time. I was going to, your wife doesn't watch these, right?
No.
Okay. I was going to tell you a story. I don't know if you recall this or not, but the first time that I ever noticed, I knew who Al Young was. I know how important you were. I was honored to have him at my event. We really promoted the hell out of it. But I saw some women at the event clamoring for a photo with you, and there was I heard some people joking about it. I said, "What's going on over here?" They're like, "Look!" And there was a couple of these young women who've had a few drinks, just excited to stand next to you and get a photo. And it's it's just like this surreal moment in bourbon where you realize this is so much bigger than just alcohol. It's so much more. The camaraderie and the family and the social side of this is just, it's everything.
If you look at some of the whiskey shows and you see Jimmy Russell at one of them, who's in his 80s now.
Always with a smile on his face.
Always a smile.
He can't stop smiling.
And he's a babe magnet. He gets women from all over the place to come over and hang out with him and get his picture taken.
That's awesome.
So I'm quite honored by it. It's kind of nice. And when my wife sees it, she just comes over and she'll say something, or I'll go back and she'll say, a little close on that one, weren't you? So this is the OBSB pick, right?
Proof,
yes, sir. 100 proof.
And go ahead and say their names. Give them a little plug because they're killing it out there.
This is from, Barrels and Brews, which is like Indiana? Where they're from?
No, I thought it was Missouri or some.
Okay.
I've never actually been there, but I've followed them on social media, and they're doing really well. Barrels and Brews, established in 2017. They've done a few picks, and Evans constantly, and I'm sure people remember Evans. He's been on the show a couple times. They do a ton of picks, and they're doing very, very well with them. And that was the first time people clamor. There's this weird thing that happens when you first get into bourbon. When you first get into alcohol, you're mixing. Right, you may be doing some cocktails, some simple stuff, and then you get into drinking it with ice. Maybe then finally drinking it with just a touch of water, and then eventually you're drinking it neat.
And then the proof goes up.
That's the next step. And then some people kind of follow this mentality that it has to be a higher proof, and people were clamoring at these. Always want cask strength from Four Roses. Evans walks up to me with this bottle. By the way, the bottle was like $35. Couldn't have been a better price. And it's 100 proof single barrel Four Roses that was just phenomenal. And I remember I immediately thought, plus we're going to get more bottles out of the barrel.
Sure.
I asked Kent immediately. And he's like, we're not doing them anymore. They're a bit of a headache because of this reason and that reason. And it's good stuff.
Yeah. And then you also have to, and that aside, not just like the impact on the sales force, you have to think chains at that point. When it's going to be skewed the same. How are they tracking it? How are they making sure the right product is like where it should be and what they're selling through? So there's a whole lot of stuff with the skewing, and it's something that all brands struggle with their private barrels. But with us having 10 recipes plus 100 proof single barrel pick, it can get a little intense.
There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, a lot of logistics that goes into getting it on the shelf, and sometimes you just got to go with a simple.
But when you come down to it, the final line is when the company thinks enough of the brand to invest in doubling our capacity and taking 3 years to do it, that says something about the commitment of the brand to the public we picked up for these many years.
A lot of expansion.
If they're going to make us from 4 million to 8 million gallons, that kind of tells you we must be doing something right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we've run out of time. Thank you for being here.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it. Nick, good
Always.
seeing you, buddy.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to take my piece of paper.
Yeah.
I was really hoping he left it. I was really hoping he left it.
Had a great time. Thank you so much.
Cheers.